Superman, you are a believer in the Constitution. You're a believer in the
Yep.
5th and the 14th Amendment. And
Yep.
you want to ensure that government at all stages complies with those amendments.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to The Unknowns. My name is Charlie Stone, and today we have Dean Cain. You may remember Dean Cain as Superman, and now he's Super ICE, I guess, Dean. You are now joining the federal law enforcement, ICE enforcement, immigration. It seems to be a bit of a change, but not really, because you have a law enforcement background. Is that correct?
Correct. So it seems to be a change, but really it's not that much of a change. I've been a deputy sheriff in Frederick County, Virginia, fully sworn, and I've been a reserve police officer in Pocatello, Idaho, for almost a decade now. So I've been standing with our law enforcement, and back in 2005, I was in Iraq with our men and women, our military. I've done things with our first responders, our law enforcement, our military forever. So it's not a crazy out of the box thing for me by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, it hasn't been, I mean, in some circles it's been well received. In some other circles, not so much, right? Some people have been saying some things about you and probably not being quite kind to you. Give me a sense of that pushback and sort of how you digest all that.
They haven't been nice to me. Look, Charlie, when you step into the arena, you're going to get ridiculed. People are going to come after you. You will look no further than what President Trump went through. It's insane and still goes through. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, great friend of mine, great guy, what they dragged him through. So what I'm getting is minor compared to them. I'm a law enforcement officer to begin with, and I'm joining a federal law enforcement agency. What they don't like is I keep hearing is, people don't like the optics of ICE jumping out of vans and picking up people at Home Depot. What they don't realize is they're going after a specific target most of the time. They're going after a specific target who is the worst of the worst, as we've categorized it. Other people are getting swept up. 70% of all the arrests that ICE has made are people with criminal convictions or pending charges. So people are looking at this the wrong way. They feel like it's your everyday person who might be here illegally, which, by the way, is a problem. If you've been here for a long time and you haven't legalized your status, that's on you. I'm sorry, but it is. We have laws in this country for a reason. They're written by our Congress. They're supposed to be upheld by our law enforcement officers. If you don't like the laws, change the laws.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you obviously have law enforcement background. You've received training, I assume, I think in St. Anthony, Pocatello, Idaho, Frederick County as a sheriff, right? You've received training in that exercise.
Of course.
Give me a sense of like your philosophy as a law enforcement officer. What is the most important thing that law enforcement officers can do while enforcing the law?
Keep people safe. That's the ultimate idea behind law enforcement is to keep people safe. And that's the first responsibility any politician has to their country, their people, is to keep people safe. And what is the instrument for that? It's law enforcement officers. So that is the number one thing. Listen, I've been trained to de-escalate. We don't want to get into bad situations. When my sheriff walks into a bar or a restaurant in Virginia, it's like Norm from Cheers. They go, "Hey, Sheriff Lenny, that's great, whatever." Same thing with my chief in Pocatello, Idaho. They're loved by the community and respected by the community because they keep the community safe by enforcing the laws.
And is there a sense of, that Norm's Cheers, there's a sense of trust, right, that has developed over time in those communities with their law enforcement officers?
Of course.
So I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you're a handsome man, you're a good spokesperson, but is ICE also wanting input onto how you believe law enforcement should be sort of, should follow, right? So trust, right? Is that important to you, that people in law enforcement are trusted?
Of course. Absolutely. I think that's huge. However, I'm not writing the policy for ICE. Acting Director Lyons is the one in charge of that. And above him is Secretary Nome. And so, if it's an optics problem where people are concerned that people are being too rough, How rough was it for Lake and Riley? How rough was it, for Jocelyn Nungaray? These people who are committing these crimes, they go after the worst of the worst. They're going after awful criminals. They're going after human traffickers. They're going after, people bringing in fentanyl and so on and so forth. And how do you do that and do it with kid gloves? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you have to be a little harder. But the bigger thing is they're keeping the communities and this country safe. And that's what it's all about.
So you had, in some of your other interviews, and I respect this, if you disagree with someone, you want to have a beer with them and talk things through.
Sure.
Right? So let's talk things through. And if you have a beer, you can have a beer. I don't have one.
I don't really drink much, but okay.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Not a beer drinker.
A metaphorical beer.
Metaphorical beer. Let's go.
But is there some sense that the masking of these agents, there's no identification on them? That is it fair for some people who sort of point that out as like, that's not how law enforcement is done in this country. This is something new. Is that something you would look to improve? I mean, to develop trust, right? That the numbers are correct, and some would disagree the actual numbers are not that high, right? That there's some people, I think 61%, some reports are that the people that they're gathering they don't have any criminal background. Is it important to see the law enforcement officers, to understand their names so that we can understand sort of their motivations, who they are, what they do, just like you did in your communities where you've served before?
Why are they masked up, Charlie?
You tell me. I don't know. I don't work for ICE.
You have no idea why they're masked up?
Well, tell me. I don't know.
Because congressmen and people are putting their identities out. Attacks on ICE agents are up over 1,000%. Violent attacks on ICE agents up over 1,000% from last year. They're going after their families. They're threatening their kids. They're threatening. So they're trying to stop people from joining up. The same thing they've done to me. It's happening big time. So they're masking their identities so these people don't get doxxed and have these lunatics come after them at their homes. Maybe they don't live in a neighborhood as safe as mine, or maybe they're, got 5 kids out there, and so they're being doxxed, their names, their addresses, everything. So that's why they didn't start off wearing masks. The masks were a result of being doxxed. That's what it's about.
So in no time did they start wearing masks and the doxing tried to occur. They actually were unmasked during a certain period of time.
As far as I understand it, that's what that's the way I look at it. Maybe I'm incorrect, but I doubt it. They didn't start off masked. They started off getting doxxed, and they were going after them. Congressman, Eric Swalwell, coming after me and saying, it was very, very, very poetic. It was really well done, Eric. He said, Superman didn't wear a mask. Well, Eric, actually, Superman was the mask for my character.
Do you think that's?
Clark do you wear glasses to hide his identity? But it was a stupid thing to say. And they're going after our law enforcement agents, and that's insane.
Do you think that's the future of law enforcement? Should
No.
FBI be masked? Should local law enforcement in Chicago?
I already answered it. No.
Okay.
No. It's specific instances, and the way that this has been drummed up. Just like I joined the police when they were during the defund the police movement. I joined then because it's insane, and we shouldn't be doxing and going after our men and women of ICE who are all ethnicities, all gender. I mean, they're just regular people, everyday people, moms and dads doing their job as best they can to keep this community and this country safe.
So completely agree with you. The people that are exercising what they've been told to do, I guess from my standpoint and others, I'm trying to understand the policy that's put in place, right?
Well, you should talk to Director Lyons about the policy. I can't put the policy in place. I can support it, and I can support our ICE agents, but I don't make the policy. If it's about optics that you're concerned with, that's another story.
Wow.
And optics are, that's a game that they all play. And when you get people jumping out of a van at a Home Depot, they're looking for somebody specific. And if other people get caught up in that, well, it's been warned beforehand. They're also offering anybody who's here illegally an easy way out. They'll give you $1,000. They'll fly you home to whatever country you're from, and you preserve the opportunity to come back at a later date and live the American dream. but you need to go through the legal process. And that's not unlike any other country on this planet.
But your role now, right, is part of ICE, and you obviously...
Well, I haven't been sworn in yet, Charlie, but it will be.
Okay. But I mean, you obviously have a good relationship with the president. You have good relations with the people who run ICE. Is there any advice that you can think that could help that process? I mean, optics is important, right?
Well, I think optics are very important.
So how do we, right? And I know there's some people that you just aren't going to please, but how do you help sate the American need of sort of more transparency to what's going on with ICE, right?
Well, I think ICE is...
It's not the people exercising it that we're trying to understand the policy and who's setting that policy, and someone like you have experience in law enforcement, how can you input in to just improve it, improve the transparency, improve the trust?
Well, one of the ways is to show who's being arrested and show who's being taken out. And ICE is working very hard at showing you every single day who's being detained, who's being kicked out of this country, who's being sent back, who's being charged. They show it every single day. This person here with a murder conviction in another country, et cetera, et cetera. They're doing it all day, every day. But people don't look at that. They look at the hyperbole and the attacks. They look at John Oliver saying that Dean Cain doesn't have to wear a mask because he's nice, because no one knows who he fucking is. Like, that's funny, but it's also...
But to your point, it doesn't help with understanding how to improve the policy.
That's my point.
Right. And I think there is some hyperbolic language on all sides, right? And the worst of the worst is sort of a term that's used. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, the Washington Post reported that at least 12 United States citizens were deported. These weren't worst of the worst. These were just people. Well, you could look at the Washington Post article on it. But
were they deported? Were they brought back? I mean, I don't know.
Well, they were brought back.
What? Pardon me?
They were brought back, but they were deported. Yes.
So they made a mistake and they corrected the mistake.
So how do we help get better data around this? You'd mentioned that there's some place where ICE posts this. Do you believe that better data will help with transparency? Like, who are the people? What are they charged with? What were their crimes? So we get a better sense of the purpose.
Well, they're showing that. People just, they post it every day, but that doesn't make news. People don't want to.
Where do they headlines? Where do they post that?
I see it on X every day.
Okay.
Every day.
Okay. On
X, which has basically become the world's town square. So it's there every single day.
But would a website be helpful to say, hey, these are the people today?
They have it on a website too. Okay. They have it on their ICE website. Okay. It's there. It's a PR game. We're talking about, public relations and optics, and which may be part of what I work with, but I haven't started working with them yet, and I will. I can't wait to, because I believe in what they're doing 100%.
And I'm not questioning your sincerity. I'm just trying to understand how a lot of Americans on both sides either are like, yes, and other people are like, what the hell is happening?
Well, do we have immigration laws or not?
Well, we do. We do.
And should they be followed?
Well, of course they should be followed.
And if they're not followed, what should happen?
Well, we should and ought, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the Supreme Court, right, has indicated the 5th and the 14th Amendment apply to persons.
Agreed.
Including people who are not citizens in this country.
Yes, okay, and that's the law. I agree with that.
Is there been proper due process for every person who has been arrested?
Well, heck, I don't know the answer to that yet, but I would assume yes, if they're afforded that by the Supreme Court. Yes, I would assume so.
Okay, so this is good news, right? I mean, you're coming in to help influence policy. My assumption is you will advocate for that due process should apply both to citizens and non-citizens who are in this country.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it currently does, though, Charlie. It absolutely currently does.
Well, I don't know. I think my misgivings isn't about the people who exercise, are told what to do. It's just, do we have respect for the 5th and 14th Amendment? And how can ICE do better to publicly show people, to establish trust, like we originally talked about? That's good in law enforcement, to ensure people understand what is going on. So my hope is you can help lead that, Superman.
Oh, I'd love to.
All right.
I mean, let's put it this way: if if you're a fully legal citizen and you're standing outside Home Depot and a bunch of guys jump out in ICE gear, are you going to run?
I don't know. I don't generally go to.
Why
Home
would you
Depot.
run?
Well, those are all important questions, but like if I do run and am detained and deported as a U.S. citizen, that's
well,
not
if you have
right.
identification, you won't be deported.
Okay.
If you have, I mean, it's not hard. It's really not hard. I mean, these ICE agents are in a tough spot when they roll up on something like this and they're going for somebody and they 15 guys running. I mean, they're in a tough spot. People we do the same thing in the sheriff's department, in the sheriff's office. You know, we do a shoot, don't shoot scenario. And we put people in these situations and they realize how difficult it is for a law enforcement officer at that point in time to make that second decision that it's going to be ridiculed over and over and over every second of that. When you think you see somebody reaching or something going on here, you don't know. And so that changes people's perspective. So I'd say to people, go ahead and, go and spend a day in an ICE agent's shoes. Go spend a day in a law enforcement officer's shoes. They're not to be villainized. These are wonderful people. The policy we'll deal with.
Okay,
I'm not in yet.
That is helpful to know because I don't think anybody wants to vilify people who are just trying to do their job, feed their families, right? The policy
I think some people do, unfortunately.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to understand. You have a balance between the 5th and the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. You have immigration and ICE agents who have deported without full hearings, without a sense of like who these people are. So how does that meld? Because I think you and I agree, right? If we're going to avoid just continual argument in this country, we have to have transparency in government. We have to have trust in the government. Regardless of whether you agree with the policy or not, trust, transparency is super important. You agree with that?
Sure, but we haven't had that look at the last administration. There wasn't a lot of trust or transparency in that administration.
Amen.
And I, as a citizen, was completely upset and bothered by it.
Sure.
So I think this administration is doing a hell of a lot better job. And I think, on the ICE front, there's certainly something that I hope I can come in and help change the optics. But the reality is, if you're here illegally, either self-deport or they're gonna find you. That's their job. And until Congress changes the law, that's what they're going to do.
Let me just ask a couple more questions. You've been very
Sure.
patient with my questions. President Trump has now mobilized federal troops into D.C.
I've read that this morning.
He's been indicating that he might do it for Chicago, L.A., New York. As a Republican, and
I'm not a Republican.
Okay, You never were Republican? Or how about this?
No.
A limited government
Yeah,
individual?
but no, I'm an independent. I've been both sides throughout my life.
Well, I guess my question could be applicable to you or not, but like, it seems like the people who have voted for Trump, the people who
I did that. I'm one of those.
Okay. That's okay. But it seems that the expansion of the federal government may run contrary to this concept of liberty, may run counter to the concept of smaller government, right?
What expansion?
If you're federalizing troops to go in to do local law enforcement in Chicago, L.A., New York, Chicago, isn't that an expansion of the powers of the federal government?
Well, A, it hasn't happened. B, it depends on what's constitutional and what is necessary, and depending on what that is. So they'll follow the law. They'll 100% follow the law. And if it's constitutional, they'll do it. I suppose in D.C., which has been, you've heard of all the crime statistics and things happening there. Big balls getting in a fight, having to step up, roving gangs, 100 people took over that stuff's crazy. It shouldn't happen anywhere, let alone in our nation's capital. So if what the president is doing is legal, I promise you there'll be a whole lot less trouble there, and law-abiding citizens won't have a problem with it whatsoever. Why would you?
And I just think there's a dispute on whether, there's some indication that this crime has actually fallen in D.C. over the last year. You mean
the ones that haven't been reported? Because they've gone through a whole thing now about crime not being reported in D.C. So if you're going to cite that, you better cite the other side.
Just providing the balance, having a beer with you.
Two
more questions.
But I've seen it in Los Angeles.
Okay.
They lie about the crime statistics because so many places don't report. And that becomes this PR game that everyone likes to play. But at the end of the day, you're either safe or you're not safe. And you can play all the semantics you want. I'm not saying you personally. I'm saying those out there Play all those games you want, but the same thing happens when they're picking on law enforcement. When your life is in danger, you call 911 and a hero shows up. That's the way it works. They can couch it any way they want to, but DC has been very unsafe for a long time, and I'm happy for one to see it getting cleaned up.
So just to conclude, right? Superman's joining ICE. Superman.
I'm one of the actors who played him. But,
okay. Well, yes, but of course, we kind of were Superman, right? Because he doesn't really exist.
I played him. I loved it.
Or
it was great.
Does he exist and you're not telling the truth?
I would have all these problems solved if he existed.
That's right.
Brother.
So Superman is joining ICE. Superman, you are a believer in the Constitution. You're a believer in the 5th and the 14th Amendment. And you want to ensure that government at all stages complies with those amendments.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Last question for you. What is unknown about you? The show's called The Unknowns. We've learned some new unknowns about you, but what is something you've never told anybody in your life? So we can.
Well, if I told you that, then everybody would know. There would be nothing that was unknown.
Nobody watches this show, man. It's like just between you and me.
There's nothing. I think when you live a life like mine, you've been out in the public eye for so long, there's very little that's unknown. My Japanese heritage was unknown until I joined ICE. And then everybody's screaming that because my grandparents and my father were interred in Minidoka, the internment camp in Idaho, because they were Japanese during World War II, that I somehow should not be able to be an ICE officer, an ICE agent. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's one of the things. And people are coming up with, you've tried to hide your Japanese-ness and da-da-da-da. I've talked about it my entire life. It's tattooed on my ankle. I mean, it's like that's madness. So I don't know what is out there that is unknown. I don't know. Maybe that I'm I would say that's unknown that I'm the newest ICE officer, but it's pretty well known by now.
All right, Dean, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate our conversation without a beer, but kind of a metaphorical beer, and wish you the best.
Absolutely, brother.